If you'd asked my sister 10 years ago who the dreamer of the family was, she would have rolled her eyes, scoffed, and said one name mine, Emily, the girl who lived in sketchbooks and stitched scraps of fabric into dresses no one asked for. Back then, I was 17. Quiet, maybe a little too idealistic. My world wasn't built on popularity or grades or fitting in. My world was made of texture and color, of hand-drawn silhouettes and makeshift runways I created in the hallway with our cat as my only audience. And yet, the night everything changed wasn't dramatic at first glance. It started in the kitchen. I was excited. I had just received an email from a local design competition, a small thing, maybe, but it meant someone out there saw potential in me. I held the printed email in my hand like a golden ticket. Sophie sat at the counter, scrolling on her phone, perfectly poised, effortlessly stylish, 2 years older, 2 decades colder. She was everything I wasn't: confident, commanding, always wearing something sleek and expensive looking, even if we weren't rich. I remember the way I hesitated, then placed the paper in front of her. I made it into the finalists, I said, voice barely above a whisper. They're showcasing my designs next month. I could win a scholarship. She looked up slowly, read the first few lines, then laughed. Design school, she said, waving the paper like a flyer for a pyramid scheme. Emily, you couldn't even hem your home ec project without Mom's help. I felt my throat tighten. I've gotten better. She shrugged. Sweetie, being a designer is like saying you want to be a rock star. Cute when you're 12, sad when you're still broke at 30. I clenched my fists. I don't want to be rich. I want to build something real, something that matters. Sophie tilted her head and gave me that smile, smug and polished. Then you should try accounting, or at least something that pays. Or hear me out, just stop dreaming before it hurts. That was Sophie, direct, brutally honest, and always convinced she knew what was best. I turned, holding back tears. My dream, so vibrant in my heart, suddenly felt fragile, childish, like paper wet with rain. That night, I went back to my room, opened my sketchpad, and stared at the half-drawn dress I had been working on. Suddenly it looked stupid. Who was I kidding? I didn't have connections, money, or even support. What I had was a stack of dreams and a sister who treated them like garbage. I thought about Mom. She was the only one who ever believed in my designs. She used to sneak into my room, leave little fabric scraps and buttons on my desk with a note, "Can't wait to see what you make next." But Mom was gone now, taken from us by a car accident 8 months earlier. And Sophie, her replacement as guardian, was not in the business of nurturing dreams. Since Mom's death, Sophie had taken over everything: the house, the bills, the decisions, and she took it seriously, to her credit. But while she handled the external world with poise and control, she handled me like a burden, like one more problem to manage. "You need a real job," she said a few days later when she found me sewing late into the night. "This can't go on. Rent's going up. You'll be 18 in a few months. Time to face reality." I was about to reply, to beg for more time, when she cut me off. "If you want to keep living here, you'll have to get a job that pays." "I'm not bankrolling a fantasy." My hands went cold. "So you're saying I can't sew here anymore?" "I'm saying," she said slowly, "if you want to keep pretending you're going to be the next Chanel, you can do it elsewhere." And that was it. No shouting, no huge fight, just cold, flat terms. My sister, the person who used to braid my hair when I was little, was now handing me an ultimatum like it was a business memo. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed instead. 2 duffel bags, one with clothes and shoes, the other with notebooks, fabric scraps, a sewing kit, and my mother's old pincushion. I left at 4:17 a.m. The street was quiet, cold. I paused for one long minute in the doorway. The light in Sophie's room was off. I knew she wouldn't wake up, wouldn't stop me, probably wouldn't even notice until noon. As I stepped out, I whispered to the air, "One day, you'll regret this." Not because I wanted revenge, not even because I hated her, but because some dreams, when fed with rejection, don't die. They sharpen. They get quieter, colder, hungrier. They turn into purpose. And I was no longer just a girl with a sketchbook. I was someone who'd build a life that would speak for itself. The bus station was mostly empty when I arrived, dragging my duffel bags behind me. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, and a vending machine in the corner clicked to life and then went silent again. I had $148 in my wallet money I'd saved from tutoring a neighbor's daughter and hemming jeans for some classmates. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I bought the cheapest ticket I could find, a one-way ride to Portland. I didn't know anyone there, didn't have a place lined up, but I'd done my research. There was a small design school offering scholarships for underrepresented students. I'd applied weeks earlier, thinking it was a long shot, a dream within a dream. The acceptance email had arrived just 2 days before Sophie's final blow. Maybe it was fate, or maybe I was just desperate enough to see patterns in anything. The ride took 14 hours. I didn't sleep. I spent the time flipping through my sketchbook by dim reading lights, tracing designs I'd drawn 100 times before. Evening wear, minimalist streetwear, deconstructed classics. I had no idea what the market wanted, but I knew what I wanted: to create fashion that was sustainable, wearable, beautiful, and built to last. When I arrived in Portland, the air was damp, and it smelled like rain and wet earth. I took a bus to a hostel I'd found online. It was cramped, smelled faintly of mildew, and cost me $38 for the night. That left me with just over $100. I didn't cry. I think something inside me had locked shut. The next morning, I walked 3 miles to the design school's campus and sat in the admissions office, holding my printed acceptance email like a passport. I didn't have a permanent address, didn't have health insurance, but I had my sketchbook, I had drive, and I had nothing left to lose. The woman at the front desk looked at me skeptically when I explained my situation, but then I handed her my portfolio. It was hand-bound lined paper, some watercolor, fabric swatches taped in. No formal training, no digital renderings, just vision. She flipped through it for 10 full minutes. I didn't say a word. Finally, she looked up and said, "It's raw, but it's good. We can work with this." I almost collapsed. A week later, I started classes. I was the only student who didn't own a laptop. I borrowed school machines when I could. I stayed late to use the free lab printers. I scrounged for materials, cutting old thrift store clothes into parts, sewing them back into something new. Upcycling wasn't just my design philosophy, it was my survival. I got a part-time job washing dishes at a cafe 2 blocks from campus. I worked the late shift from 7 p.m. to midnight. On weekends, I worked the morning shift too. Every hour paid for thread, fabric, needles, bus fare. Some nights, I slept in the school library because I didn't have enough for another hostel night. I'd hide behind the bookcases until closing, then curl up in the back corner near the oversized pattern-making books. I never told anyone. I just endured. There were days I doubted myself, days I wanted to call Sophie and say, "You were right. I can't do this." But I didn't. Not once. Instead, I poured my doubts into design. There was one assignment in particular: create a garment inspired by transformation, while others designed butterfly motifs or chameleon textures. I created a jacket, made entirely of repurposed canvas tent scraps and denim from abandoned jeans. Each panel was stitched by hand. The inside held pockets of memory, a sewn-in photo of my mother, a quote she once wrote me on a napkin. I named it the shell. When I presented it, my professor didn't say a word for 30 seconds. Then she said, "This doesn't just say transformation. It is transformation." That was the first time someone in the industry looked at me like I belonged. I kept that jacket. Still have it, actually. It's framed in my office now, behind museum glass. A reminder of the moment I started becoming who I was meant to be. During the second semester, I applied for a mentorship program with a small local label. The owner, an older designer named Joan Alvarez, had made a name in sustainable fashion long before it became trendy. She accepted only one mentee a year. I remember standing outside her studio, trembling. I didn't even own a blazer. I wore my best thrifted shirt and hoped she wouldn't care. She didn't. Joan looked at my portfolio newer, tighter, now full of vision and intention, and said, "You've got a rebel's mind and a craftswoman's hands. That's rare." She gave me the internship. For 6 months. I learned everything: fabric sourcing, pattern grading, client meetings. I watched her defend her designs like they were her children, and that taught me how to defend my own. By the time I graduated, I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a designer. A poor one, a tired one, but a real one. I remember standing in the mirror the day I received my diploma. It wasn't framed, it wasn't fancy, but I held it up and whispered, "You did it, Mom. Not Sophie, not them. You. You were always the one who believed I could." After graduation, I had two choices: go home, where Sophie still lived in that too pristine house with her color-coded planner and perfect eyebrows, or stay in Portland and keep clawing my way through the industry. I didn't even let the first option finish its sentence. There was nothing for me there. I sublet a tiny studio apartment near the industrial district. Studio was a generous term. It was a converted utility room above a closed-down bookstore. The ceiling sloped, the windows were cracked, and the plumbing moaned like a haunted house. But the rent was $400 a month, and the landlord didn't mind that I paid in cash and occasionally late. I set up a sewing station next to the only window. My mattress lay directly beneath the drafting table. I had one skillet, two bowls, and a kettle. Most nights, I ate eggs and toast, sometimes just toast, but I was free. I landed a part-time assistant gig at a small boutique that specialized in slow fashion. The owner, a woman named Lena, was chaotic but brilliant. She let me take scraps home, let me stay after hours to work on my own patterns. She even let me dress one of the mannequins with a design I'd made from linen curtains and discarded belts. A customer bought it. The sale was small, barely $70 after Lena took her cut. But to me, it was proof that someone out there would wear what I imagined. I stood in the back room after that sale, holding the crumpled cash like it was a love letter. I started posting my designs online. First, just photos, then short reels. I didn't show my face. I let the clothes speak. Slowly, followers trickled in. Then came the comments. Where can I buy this? Do you take custom orders? Who are you?" It lit something in me. Not ego. Purpose. I'd spent years being invisible. Now, through thread and form and silhouette, people saw me. I named my online handle MA, short for Emily Alara. My full name felt too heavy, too attached to the past. Ime was leaner, sharper. It was who I was becoming. I stitched through the nights, slept in catnaps, sketched during my lunch breaks, and on the weekends, I visited flea markets, bought damaged fabric in bulk, and begged tailors for their offcuts. My fingers developed calluses. My back ached, But I didn't stop. Within a year, my online orders became too much to handle on my own. I hired a former classmate, Ray, to help me cut and prep. He worked for cheap, believed in what we were doing, and had a wicked eye for asymmetrical design. We made a good team. That fall, I took a risk and rented a proper workspace, a shared studio above a print shop, with concrete floors and huge windows that let in pale northern light. We painted one wall cobalt blue and hung up mood boards like altarpieces. I remember sitting there one morning, early, the city fog creeping across the glass, thinking, this is it. This is the dream. Not polished, not perfect, but mine. We launched the first official EME capsule collection that October, 8 pieces, all made from 100% upcycled materials. Every item named after a feeling: resolve, shelter, silence, rise. I expected maybe a few dozen orders. We sold out in 48 hours. A micro-influencer had featured one of our jackets. Suddenly, we weren't just a cute, sustainable brand, we were something to watch. Lena cried when I told her. Joan sent champagne. Ray danced in the studio with scissors in his hand and almost cut his ear. I laughed for the first time in weeks. And then I cried. Not because I was overwhelmed, because for the first time since I walked out of Sophie's house, I didn't feel like a runaway. I felt like a builder. Word spread. Our second collection pulled in 4 times the orders. We partnered with a small eco-retailer in San Francisco. An article in a digital fashion mag named us the future of conscious couture. I didn't even know what that meant, but it sounded good. We didn't have an office, or a receptionist, or even a break room. But we had vision, momentum, and enough revenue to finally hire a third team member. I had just finished calculating payroll when an email popped up in my inbox. Subject line: application for operations manager position. I clicked it and froze. Sophie Carter. At first, I thought it was spam or a prank. But the resume was real, detailed, thorough. Same old Sophie, organized to a fault. She had worked at a logistics firm for 5 years, then at a tech startup that recently went under. She was looking for a new challenge in a growing creative organization. I stared at the screen for a long time, long enough for Ray to walk in, see my face, and ask, "You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. I closed the email, then opened it again. There it was, Sophie's cover letter. I've always admired EMA's values and mission. Though we've taken different paths in life, I believe I can contribute meaningfully to your operations strategy. I wanted to laugh. Admired values. She hadn't even believed I could sew. But then, another voice inside me whispered, maybe that's why this moment matters. I didn't delete the email. I didn't respond either. I just sat back in my chair, the city glowing beyond the studio window, and thought, what would it mean to hold the power now? And what would I do with it? I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling of my studio apartment, the hum of distant traffic crawling in through the window. Sophie's email played on loop in my mind. I kept wondering, why now? Why me? Was it just a job to her? Did she even realize this was my company? Was it possible that in all her meticulous, bullet-pointed brilliance, she'd sent her resume into the arms of the very person she had once discarded like a used napkin? Or worse, did she know exactly who I was, and was hoping I'd be too professional, too gracious, to turn her away? By morning, I'd read her resume 10 more times. It was good, too good. Her experience managing complex logistics, vendor contracts, distribution pipelines, exactly what I needed as EME grew. Damn it. That was the worst part. She wasn't just qualified. She was perfect for the role. Ray arrived at the studio a little before 9, coffee in one hand, a roll of linen in the other. He was humming some indie band I could never quite remember. "You good?" he asked, tossing me my usual almond croissant. "Sure," I lied. But then I blurted it. "My sister applied." He blinked. "Wait, the sister?" I nodded. He whistled. Low. "And you're actually considering it?" I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, unsure of the answer myself. "I don't know. She's everything we need. And I don't want to make this about me. This company, it's not a diary. It's a business." Ray shrugged. "It can be both. You built it out of your bones. That means it gets to feel personal." I didn't respond, but I took his words with me. By the end of the week, I made the decision she would get the interview. Not the job. Not yet. Just a seat at the table. I drafted the email carefully. Formal. Neutral. No indication of our history. "Dear Ms. Carter, thank you for your interest in EMA. We were impressed by your qualifications and would like to invite you for an initial interview next Thursday at 10 a.m. Warm regards, Emily Alara, founder and creative director, EMA." I stared at my own signature for a long time. The power of it. The finality. And then I clicked send. Thursday arrived with an odd quiet in the studio. The machines were off. Ray had stepped out early to avoid awkwardness. It was just me, sunlight through glass, and the buzz of nerves I hadn't felt since my first trunk show. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. Then came the click of heels. She appeared in the doorway like someone who'd never known doubt. Hair pulled back into a sleek bun, cream blazer, black trousers, minimalist gold jewelry. She looked expensive. Exactly as I remembered her. But her eyes, those had changed. There was something under the surface. Not quite fear, not quite shame, but something. "Emily," she said, her voice steady. "You look different." "So do you," I replied. I gestured to the chair across from mine. She sat, smoothed her pants, and pulled out a portfolio spreadsheets, proposals, charts. Sophie had always come armed. "I didn't realize this was your company when I applied," she said. "Honestly," I raised an eyebrow. "And when you got the interview request signed with my name?" Her smile faltered. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." I blinked. "You're my sister, not a barista I met once in 2011. She flinched. Silence stretched between us, taut and trembling. "Look," she said finally, "I know we have history, and not the good kind, but I need this job, and I think I can help you." I leaned back, observing her, not as a sibling, as a candidate. "I've reviewed your resume. Your skill set is strong. Your experience matches exactly what we're looking for. But before we talk about operations, I need to ask one thing." She nodded. "Why now?" Sophie looked down at her hands. Perfectly manicured. Then out the window. "The startup I worked for folded," she said. "They overhired. Then crashed. I was cut without warning. 2 months of severance. And that's it." I stayed quiet. "And the truth," she added, her voice lowering. "Every job I've applied for feels hollow. The same soulless work in different offices." Then I saw Emmy's listing. I recognized the name, not just because it was you, but because the brand had heart. People believe in what you're doing. She looked at me now. Really looked. "You built something from nothing." And I mocked that once. I won't pretend I didn't. But I've changed. I had to. Her words hung there. Honest. Imperfect. I looked at the woman in front of me and realized something that shook me. This wasn't the girl who sneered at my sketchbook. This was someone who had fallen, like I had once. Someone who finally knew what it felt like to be small. I didn't forgive her in that moment. That would take longer. But I did see her. Clearly. All right, I said, pushing a sheet of paper across the table. Let's talk terms. She blinked. I got the job. You got a trial. 1 month. You work under Ray. You handle logistics, inventory, scheduling. You don't touch the design department. You report to me. And if you undermine my authority, even once, it's over. Sophie nodded quickly. Understood. I stood. She followed. We shook hands. Hers trembled. And for the first time in years, I felt in control. Not because I had power over her, but because I was choosing what kind of woman I wanted to be. The kind who turned away from the past, or the kind who could build something stronger from the ashes of it. It was strange having Sophie in the studio, like introducing a foreign body into an ecosystem that had finally started to thrive. Ray watched her carefully, never rude, but always with a wall up. I understood. He knew my history with her in fragments enough to know she'd hurt me, not enough to know how deeply. She arrived early every day, always dressed sharply, always carrying that clipboard like a shield. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was direct and efficient, the work impeccable. She reorganized our vendor system in 3 days, creating a digital dashboard that tracked delivery dates, costs, and vendor satisfaction. Ray, who used to scribble things on Post-its and tape them to the sewing machine, was both annoyed and impressed. She's scary good at this, he muttered one afternoon as she floated past us to take a call. Yeah, I said. She always was. What surprised me most was how quickly she adapted to our chaos. We weren't a glossy corporation with quarterly parties and catered lunches. We were a tight-knit team living on takeout and caffeine, half of us working out of passion more than paycheck. And yet Sophie, with her blazer and bullet journal, folded herself into our rhythm. She didn't try to dominate. She didn't try to charm. She just worked. One Friday evening, as Ray and I were finishing up measurements for the next drop, Sophie stepped in and gently asked, "Can I see the new lookbook layout?" I hesitated. The lookbook was my domain. It was where I told our story not just through clothing but through narrative, imagery, rhythm. Letting her in felt like handing over a page from my diary. But then I nodded. She pulled up a stool and sat beside me, reviewing the photos, the typography, the flow. She didn't criticize. She asked questions. Why did you place this design after that one? Is there a reason this image is the only one in black and white? They weren't jabs. They were curious, engaged. By the time we finished reviewing, something had shifted, not just in the layout, but between us. That night, as we locked up, she lingered by the door. "You're good at this," she said softly. "I know," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. She gave me a small smile, almost sheepish. "I used to think fashion was fluff, just clothes." I tilted my head, and now... She looked around the studio at the sketches taped to the wall, at Ray's cutting table, at the mannequin wearing a half-finished coat made from repurposed upholstery fabric. Now I see its architecture, just softer. I didn't say anything, but her words stayed with me all weekend. The next few weeks flew by. We were prepping for our first official fashion show, a small event in an industrial gallery downtown, co-sponsored by a sustainability nonprofit. For me, it was a milestone. For Sophie, it was a crash course in the madness of live events. She took over scheduling fittings, managing PR contacts, coordinating with lighting and sound crews. She even got a local bakery to sponsor pastries and drinks. "Who are you?" Ray whispered, when he found trays of vegan croissants in the break room. "Just someone who knows how to beg and barter." Sophie replied, sipping her coffee with a smirk. On the night of the show, the gallery buzzed with soft music and the rustle of program pamphlets. Our models, volunteers, artists, friends waited backstage with makeshift hangers and nervous eyes. I stood behind the curtain, clutching the hem of the final piece Lightfall, a hand-draped gown made from layers of sheer dead-stock silk. Sophie approached quietly. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, terrified. She adjusted the collar of my jacket and said, "You're about to make them see you." I swallowed hard, and then the lights went down. The music rose, and one by one, our pieces walked the runway. The applause at the end wasn't thunderous, but it was honest. People stood. People cried. One woman came up afterward and whispered, "I've never seen grief look so graceful." It took me a second to understand what she meant. Then I realized each design, each fold, each stitch I'd poured my pain into them. My mother, my hunger, my exile, my hope. They had all taken shape in thread. After the last guest left, I collapsed onto a bench in the gallery's back room. Sophie sat beside me. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. Eyes closed. "We did." There was a long pause, and then, almost too softly to hear "I'm sorry," I opened my eyes. "For what?" "For everything. For mocking your dreams. For making you feel small. For not seeing you when I should have." I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness wasn't a button you pressed. It was a seed you buried and hoped would bloom. But I let my shoulder rest against hers. Just for a moment. That was enough. The next morning, I received an email from an investor. Someone had attended the show and was interested in backing EMA's next collection. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a doorway. We could expand. Hire 2 more people. Move into a real space with a proper kitchen and storage that didn't leak when it rained. I printed the email and brought it into the studio. Sophie was already at her desk, typing away. I handed it to her. She read it, her eyes widened. "This is big." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "And I want you to help lead it." She looked up, measuring me, then herself. "You sure?" I nodded. "You've earned it." She exhaled slowly. And just like that, the girl who once told me dreams were childish was now helping me build one. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. Not in short, anxious exhales, but in full, soul-deep draws of air. EMA was thriving. We had new orders coming in weekly, a small wait list for custom pieces, and 2 new hires: Asha, a tech-savvy design assistant fresh out of school, and Miles, a pattern maker with quiet hands and an encyclopedic knowledge of seams. And Sophie. She was blooming. She traded her blazers for structured jumpsuits. Still professional, but with a flair. She started coming to fittings, offering suggestions not about color or fabric, but about how our messaging could be more impactful. She'd say things like, "This speaks grief, but does the copy make people feel that?" And damn it, she was usually right. Sometimes I caught her sketching in the margins of her planner. Nothing elaborate, just silhouettes, rough ideas. She'd hide them when I looked. I never said anything, but I noticed. It was in this period of quiet momentum, during a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing dye samples with Asha, that Ray burst into the studio, slightly breathless. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, waving his phone like a flag. What I asked, half distracted. "Look." He turned the screen toward me. It was an article on a fashion business blog. 10 under 30, designers reshaping sustainable fashion. My name was number 4. I blinked. "That's me." "You're number 4. M." Ray grinned. "They even mentioned the runway show." I took the phone, reading the excerpt slowly. Emily Alara, founder of eMay, blends raw emotion with eco-conscious construction. Her story is as resilient as her work. I wasn't sure which part hit harder, that someone had seen me, or that they'd understood me. I felt Sophie's presence behind me. She took the phone gently, read the paragraph, and smiled. "You deserve this," she said simply. Later that night, I opened my old sketchbook, the one I'd carried from city to city. The edges were worn, pages frayed, ink smudged from time and touch. I flipped to the first page, where I'd once drawn a floor plan of my imaginary studio. I looked around. It wasn't identical, but it was close. The windows, the fabrics, the hum of machines. It was real now. I closed the book and turned off the lights. 3 days later, I received a DM from Nathan, Carter Nayim. I stared at it for a long time before opening. "Hey, long time. Just saw an article about you. Didn't realize you'd become such a big deal. Sophie mentioned you guys were working together now. That's cool. Anyway, Dad's retirement party is next month. Thought you'd want to know. Nathan, my cousin. Sophie and I had grown up with him Sunday visits, shared Thanksgivings, his annoying laugh echoing in the backyard. We hadn't spoken in over 7 years. Not since the day he told me, jokingly, that I was the family's artsy charity case. I read the message again. Retirement party, Dad. The word felt foreign now, sharp-edged. I hadn't seen or spoken to my father since I left home at 17, not even when MA launched, not when the first article ran, not when I was featured in that eco-fashion documentary. Silence. Complete. And now a message. Not from him, but from Nathan. I showed Sophie. Her face shifted. Not shock, not concern, just unreadable. "He didn't ask me to reach out," she said quietly. "Nathan probably took it upon himself." I waited. She finally looked at me. "I think you should come." I blinked. "Seriously." "Not for him," she said, "for you." I laughed sharp, defensive. "Why would I go back to that house because you don't live in its shadow anymore?" I stared at her. "Because walking into that room now," she continued, "you won't be their disappointment. You'll be the woman who built something from nothing, the one they chose not to see. And maybe they need to feel that." I said nothing. That night, I sat with the thought. What would it look like walking through that door? Would he be surprised? Would he pretend I was still just the mistake who never followed the family script? Or would he finally see me? And even if he didn't, did it matter? The invitation came a week later. Cream-colored envelope, gold lettering, embossed initials. Richard Carter, celebrating 35 years of excellence, retirement. Gala and family tribute, formal attire. Required. I laughed when I read family tribute. Sophie walked into my office as I was turning the envelope over in my hands. "You going?" she asked. "I don't know." She nodded. "If you decide to, I'll stand with you." That sentence, simple as it was, felt like something sacred. Because for so many years, she hadn't stood with me. And now, here she was. I made the decision quietly. No dramatic rehearsal, no vengeful fantasy. Just clarity. I wasn't going for closure. I was going to reclaim the space I was pushed out of. Not to scream, just to stand. I designed a new outfit for the event, structured yet soft, like armor made of silk. It was dark navy, with hand-dyed accents and a hidden pocket stitched into the lining. It didn't scream. It whispered. It owned the room. I slipped the invitation into the pocket and told no one but Sophie and Ray. The night before the gala, I walked through the studio alone, ran my fingers along bolts of fabric, checked the machines, stood beneath the blue painted wall, and let my memories breathe. I remembered the pain. I remembered the hunger. I remembered stitching clothes in the dark while Sophie told me to grow up. And now she worked for me. And I wasn't just doing well, I was becoming a name. But more importantly, I'd become myself. No permission, no apology, just truth. The night of the gala arrived cloaked in winter chill and glittering arrogance. The Carter residence, more estate than house, looked exactly as I remembered. White columns, manicured hedges, that obnoxiously proud iron gate. Except now, floodlights lit the path, and valet drivers lined the curb like chess pieces, the kind of excess that makes you feel small on purpose. But I didn't feel small anymore. I stepped out of the car, Sophie beside me. She wore a sleek black pantsuit of her own design, a quiet nod to the brand she now helped build. I wore Resolve, the piece from our first capsule collection, navy blue silk over a charcoal corset top, raw edge hems stitched by hand. It was the first piece I ever made after a panic attack. The one that reminded me I could always start again. We didn't speak as we approached the front door. Sophie simply looped her arm through mine, not a question, not a demand, just presence, a quiet solidarity. Inside, the house buzzed with voices, laughter, champagne. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Everything gleamed: polished floors, crystal chandeliers, guests in dresses that screamed old money and inherited comfort. It was as if nothing had ever happened. As if I hadn't left this place carrying my dreams in a duffel bag. As if I hadn't spent years scraping meaning out of scraps. As if I hadn't existed. Heads turned as we entered. Some stared, blinking as if trying to match the name to the memory. Others whispered, "Is that Emily Carter? She looks so different. Didn't she move away, run off or something?" We moved through the room slowly, deliberately. Sophie guided me past the buffet tables, past the photo wall littered with Richard's accolades, past a life curated for applause. Then we saw him. My father, Richard Carter, standing near the center of the room. Glass of scotch in hand, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women in pastel cocktail dresses. His hair was more silver now, his posture just as proud. He didn't see me at first, and then he did. His eyes paused mid-conversation, tracked me like I was an unexpected storm cloud drifting through his otherwise perfect sky. He said nothing. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared. It took everything in me not to shrink. But I didn't come here to seek his warmth. I came to show that I no longer needed it. The MC took the mic a few minutes later. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention, tonight we honor not just a successful banker, but a father, a mentor, a man whose name has become synonymous with excellence, Mr. Richard Carter." Applause filled the room. He stepped forward, took the mic, sipped his scotch, then looked directly at me. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began. "I've spent my life building systems, supporting families, preparing the next generation to carry what I've created forward." He turned to Nathan, standing off to the side in a fitted tuxedo, smug and polished. "I'm proud to say my son Nathan will be stepping into my role at the firm. A legacy handed from father to son." Another round of applause. He let it settle, then added, "As for my daughter," my breath caught. A silence swept through the room. He chuckled. "Well, Emily's taken a different path." Light laughter rippled among the guests. "She always was the creative one," he said, a touch of condescension in his tone. "Chose scissors over spreadsheets, sketches over strategy. But hey, every family needs an artist, right? He raised his glass to wild dreams. And the people brave or foolish enough to chase them? People laughed. Not cruelly, but carelessly. And somehow, that stung more. I stood there, perfectly still, heart pounding, but face unreadable. Sophie reached for my hand. I didn't flinch, but I did let go. And then I stepped forward. The MC looked alarmed. Uh, Emily. It'll just take a second, I said, voice clear and unwavering. I climbed the small platform and took the mic. The room hushed. I looked out at the sea of faces. Old teachers, former neighbors, people who remembered me only as the awkward girl with calloused fingers and too much to prove. My father is right. I began. I did take a different path. I paused. My path led me out of this house, out of this world of polished smiles and curated reputations. It led me to cold apartments, late-night shifts, and clothes stitched by hand under a single bulb. It led me to people who had nothing and still gave everything. And eventually, it led me to build something. A few people shifted uncomfortably. My company EMA was born from the pieces of a life that this family once considered disposable. I looked at Richard, directly, and I didn't come here tonight to make peace or demand recognition. I came here to say your silence didn't break me. Gasps, a cough. Someone whispered. She really said that. I held my ground. You said every family needs an artist. I continued. Well, I built a brand, a movement, a legacy. And while you passed your empire to your son, I forged one with my own hands. I stepped back from the mic. No applause. Just silence. Thick, startled, real. I didn't wait for his response. I walked off the stage. Sophie met me halfway. We exited through the front door, into the cold air, into the night that felt more like morning. Only once we reached the car did I finally speak. Was that too much? Sophie shook her head, eyes shining. No, she said. That was exactly enough. The video clip went viral before I even got home. Someone, probably one of the junior associates trying to impress LinkedIn, had recorded my speech and posted it with the caption, "When the family disappointment becomes the founder of a fashion empire." 12 seconds, 1 million views in 3 days. The comments ranged from queen behavior to, "My estranged cousin needs to see this." I didn't read them all. I couldn't. I was still processing the night itself. Back in the studio, the air felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just aware, like everyone had seen something sacred and didn't quite know how to hold it. Ray greeted me at the door with a box of donuts and a look that said, "Damn, you really did that. I saw the clip," he said, grinning. Twice. I rolled my eyes, but I smiled too. Then Sophie walked in. She didn't say anything at first, just set down her tote bag and took a long sip of coffee. "You were brave," she said finally. "You were right," I replied. We didn't have to say more. But things had shifted. Not badly, just undeniably. Sophie started staying later at the studio. She spent more time in meetings, asked deeper questions about design choices and brand voice. It was like the speech public, raw, irreversible, had unlocked something in her. One afternoon, I caught her alone at the work table, flipping through fabric swatches, scribbling notes. There was a sketch beside her, a wrap dress with asymmetric shoulders and minimalist seaming, clean, elegant, unmistakably hers. "You designed this?" I asked, pretending I didn't already know. She looked up, startled. "It's nothing, just playing around." I picked up the paper. "It's good." She gave a self-deprecating laugh. You don't have to say that. I'm not. I said, I'm offering you a chance to pitch it for our next collection. She blinked. Seriously? Yes. You've earned that. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the paper and slipped it into her notebook. It wasn't just about the dress. It was about being seen as something more than the girl who once slammed the door on my dreams. She was becoming someone new, and I wanted to give her space to step into it. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the head of a major eco-fashion convention in New York. Your speech at the Carter Gala has been circulating, the woman said. We'd love for you to keynote our closing night. Talk about building from rejection, leading with purpose, that kind of thing. I stared at the phone like it might bite. Me. Keynote. You're not just a designer anymore. Emily, you're a voice. I said yes. And I asked Sophie to come with me. She hesitated at first. You sure? Of course. I said, you're part of this story too. So we flew together, sat side by side on the plane, sharing peanuts and playlists. I watched her scribble notes on her phone, talking points, logistics, a list of things I might forget to pack. The way she cared now wasn't transactional. It was genuine. The night of the keynote, the convention hall was packed. Hundreds of designers, journalists, students, CEOs. The lights were blinding. The mic echoed. But I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting to be heard. I knew they were listening. I told them the story, not the viral, neat version, the real one, the ramen nights, the duct-taped windows, the whispered doubts, the day Sophie threw out my sewing machine, the years we didn't speak, and then the choice I made not to shut her out forever, but to build something better, even if it meant inviting her back in. I ended the speech with a quote I once wrote in the back of my first sketchbook. There is power in building the very thing they said you never could. Standing ovation. Sophie was the first to rise. Back at the hotel, after the whirlwind, after the press photos and post-speech drinks, we sat by the window in silence. City lights blinked below us. She looked at me and said, I've been thinking about something. I want to stay. I frowned. You mean in New York? No. At EMA, I want to commit, really commit. Not just operations, design, branding, storytelling. I want in. All in. I blinked. I was going to wait. She continued. But after that speech, I knew. I want to be part of what you're building. Not just as a sister, as a partner. I let her words hang in the air. She wasn't asking for a title. She was offering her whole self. The very thing she once mocked, now she wanted to help nurture it. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Okay, she repeated, almost disbelieving. Yes, let's make it official. We shook hands. No performance, no tears, just two women, two sisters, choosing each other finally on their own terms. Back in Portland, the energy shifted once again. With Sophie's full partnership, we began planning our most ambitious project yet, a joint line. Co-designed, co-led, telling both our stories, the divides, the healing, the silence, the return. We called it Fray, because the strongest fabric is often made from broken threads. The announcement of Fray sent small shockwaves through the industry, not just because of the designs, though those were striking, bold, and unapologetically raw, but because of the narrative behind it. Two sisters, once estranged, now co-designers. A brand forged in defiance, rebuilt in trust. That kind of story doesn't just sell, it resonates. We did a soft launch digital lookbook, early access sign up, behind the scenes snippets. We let the work speak, but we didn't hide anymore. The first teaser featured both our names, side by side, in all caps. Emily Alara and Sophie Carter. Frey. I remember the first time I saw it on the homepage, my hands shook. Not from fear, from the realization that for the first time in years, I wasn't doing this alone, and yet, rebuilding a bond isn't as simple as writing a new chapter. Old wounds echo. One evening, we stayed late to finalize fabric selections. I was bleary-eyed, hunched over color swatches. Sophie brought me tea, her expression tentative. "You always forget to hydrate," she said. I looked up. "Thanks." She lingered, then sat across from me. "I think about her a lot," she said after a long pause. "Mom." She nodded. What she'd say if she saw us now. I forced a smile, probably something cheesy, like, "Took you long enough." We both chuckled softly. But there was weight in the silence that followed. "She always said you were the brave one," Sophie murmured. "I didn't get it back then. I thought I was the strong one, the practical one. You were," I said. "You kept things running when she died. You didn't have the luxury of falling apart." Her eyes glistened. "I fell apart quietly. When you left. That stopped me cold. I was angry at first," she admitted. "But mostly jealous. You had the courage to choose yourself. I never did." I exhaled, emotion catching at the back of my throat. "You could have called," I said. "So could you," she whispered. And there it was. The truth neither of us had ever said aloud. We'd both chosen silence. For survival, for spite, for pride. But we were done punishing each other. We reached across the table, hands meeting over a spread of fabric. That was the price of reconnection, facing not just what had been done to you, but what you'd done in return. The day Frey launched officially was unlike any other. We booked a raw, sunlit warehouse near the river-exposed beams, concrete floors, walls left unfinished on purpose. It echoed the name, the story, the essence of the line: real, honest, unrefined. The crowd was double what we expected: industry people, bloggers, even a few celebrities who'd worn EMA in editorials. Press badges flashed like strobe lights. We didn't hire models this time. We cast real women, former clients, friends, people who had been through something. One of them was Marla, a domestic abuse survivor who'd started her own tailoring business in her garage. Another was Nadine, who had aged out of foster care and was now mentoring younger girls through a nonprofit we supported. They walked in pieces that bore names like split, wound, rewoven, whole. Each design had a story, some in their stitching, some in the very way they moved. And when the show ended, and Sophie and I stepped onto the runway, the applause didn't roar. It built, slow, reverent, like recognition catching fire. The reviews that followed were humbling. Frey is not just fashion, it's reconciliation in motion, a masterclass in transformation, personal and material. If pain is a thread, Aimee and Frey are its loom. We celebrated with pizza and ginger beer back at the studio. Ray toasted us with a paint-stained measuring tape in one hand. "To choosing the hard road," he said, "and making it couture." Everyone laughed. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years: Not pride, not vindication, but peace. Of course, not everyone was thrilled by the evolution. 2 weeks after the launch, I received a formal letter from Richard. It arrived by courier. No return address, just a single envelope, pressed flat. Sophie opened it first. I saw her jaw tighten. "What does it say?" I asked. She handed it over. "Emily, congratulations on your latest collection. A colleague forwarded me the coverage. You've clearly built something unexpected. I still don't understand the choices you made, but I acknowledge the outcome. I suppose that's as close as I'll get to saying well done. Regards, Richard Carter." No warmth, no apology. Just a sterile nod from the man who once scoffed at every dream I dared to have. I folded the letter, tossed it into the recycling bin. Not out of anger, out of finality. Because some people will never see past their own reflection. And I was done hoping he might. Sophie watched me quietly. "You're really okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Because I have what he can't give me." "What's that?" I looked around the studio, the team, the fabric, the vision. "You?" She blinked, then smiled. Soft, real, no defenses. We didn't hug, didn't need to. Frey was proof enough. The season shifted, but May and Frey kept rising. What began as a whisper on the margins of sustainable fashion was now woven into the larger conversation. Our garments didn't just wear well, they meant something. They told stories that others were afraid to. And somehow, along the way, the story behind them, our story, became just as powerful as the pieces themselves. But with growth came choices. One afternoon, I was sitting with Sophie in our new office, an airy converted studio with exposed brick, sunlit skylights, and plants that Sophie somehow kept alive. We were reviewing a licensing proposal from a luxury conglomerate, the kind that could put us in department stores across 3 continents. "They want the full catalog," Sophie said, "and access to your early sketches for marketing." I frowned. My sketches. "They think the journey sells the clothes." I leaned back. "Do you think we're ready to hand that over?" She paused. "I think we're ready to decide what success looks like to us." It hit me how far we'd come, not just as a company, as sisters. There had been a time when Sophie couldn't see past the numbers, and I couldn't trust anyone with the narrative. Now we were doing both. Together, we passed on the licensing deal, not out of pride, out of clarity. We weren't building fast fashion with a sad backstory. We were crafting a legacy stitch by stitch, on our terms. 6 months later, we opened our flagship store in Portland. It was more than a store. It was part boutique, part archive, part workshop. One corner displayed our original pieces behind museum glass. Another had a table where customers could patch, mend, or even rework garments they'd bought years earlier. We called it the thread table, because nothing is ever really finished. The launch party was small, intimate. No flashing cameras, just people who had been there from the beginning. Friends, partners, former models, Ray, Joan, Lena from the boutique who gave me my first chance, and Mom. Not in person, of course, but in every detail. A framed note she once wrote me hung near the entrance. "Keep building. Baby, one stitch at a time." Sophie stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. She wore her own designs, structured but soft. Edges raw, seams intentionally exposed. "Look at us," she whispered. "Who would have thought I did?" I said. She grinned. "Of course you did." Time passed. Awards came. Profiles were written. But the moment that stayed with me happened on a rainy Tuesday. Long after the press had moved on, a girl walked into the store. 15, maybe. wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and shoes scuffed to the sole. She wandered quietly, ran her fingers across a cotton linen blend blazer we had hanging on the back wall. Sophie walked over, smiling gently, looking for anything special, she asked. The girl shook her head. Just wanted to see what it felt like. Feel free. Sophie said. This place is yours too. Later. As the girl lingered near the counter, I approached her. You sew? I asked. She looked down. Embarrassed. Kind of. I try. I smiled. So did I. She stared at me, confused. You're the designer, one of them. You don't look like a CEO. I laughed. That's the point. She cracked a tiny smile. Here, I said, pulling out one of our zines making from the margins, a DIY guide we'd published for students, beginners, and self-taught designers. No charge, I added, but you have to promise to keep sketching. She nodded solemnly, as if I'd just handed her a sword. She turned to leave, then paused. My sister says art isn't practical. I raised an eyebrow. Is your sister always right? No. Then prove her wrong. She left. And I stood there, stunned by the echo of my own past. One day, Sophie and I took a trip, not for business, for closure. We drove to our childhood home. The house hadn't changed. The white fence still chipped at the corners. The hydrangeas Mom once tended now wilted. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left, just like it always had. The house was up for sale, no one inside. We didn't go in. We stood at the edge of the driveway, silent. I used to think this place was everything, I said. Sophie nodded. Sophie. And now I know it was just where we started. We stayed there a moment longer, then turned back toward the car. As we drove away, the past didn't follow us. It stayed behind where it belonged. Years later, a reporter asked me what success meant. I didn't say awards. I didn't say storefronts. I didn't even say freedom. I said success is having the power to offer someone else what you were once denied. That's what I gave Sophie. A job offer, a second chance. A seat beside me at the table she once told me I'd never reach. And she took it. Not because she had to, but because she chose to build something too. Something that outlasted pain. Something stitched not with resentment, but with resolve. Now, every time I see our label sewn into the collar of a garment, I feel it again. Not revenge, not pride, but peace. Because we built something lasting, and no one, not even the voices of our past, can take that from us.